My husband wrote the song. He was my husband at the time, Bert Bacharach. And he wrote the song, and it had not yet come out. It was on Broadway.
September 1974. NBC puts a police drama on the air with a woman's name above the title. The show is called Policewoman. The character is Sergeant Suzanne Anderson, known to everybody who watched it as Pepper. She works undercover for the Los Angeles Police Department, and for 4 seasons, she is on American television every week, and the woman playing her is credited with something no actress had managed before her. She is carrying an hour-long network drama on her own. It runs from 1974 to 1978. It wins her a Golden Globe. Young women across the United States start applying to police academies, and she has said that departments told her directly that the show was the reason. By 1976, Angie Dickinson is one of the most recognizable faces in America. She is 94 years old now. She lives alone in a house in Beverly Hills, and if you passed her on the pavement this week collecting her post, there is a fair chance you would walk straight past. Take a deep breath, because how Angie Dickinson lives now is very different from what most people assume. So why did a woman with 50 years of work behind her simply stop saying yes? What happened in January 2007 that changed the shape of the rest of her life? And what is she actually doing at 94 on a street full of famous names? If Pepper Anderson was on in your house on a Friday night, a tap of the like button puts her in front of somebody else who remembers. She was born a very long way from any of it. Angeline Brown was born on the 30th of September 1931 in Culm, North Dakota. Culm is a small farming town in the southeast corner of the state, the kind of place that had a few hundred people in it in 1931 and has fewer now. Wheat country, hard winters, a main street, a grain elevator, and a church. It sits about 40 miles from Strasburg, which is where Lawrence Welk grew up. 2 towns, 40 miles apart, on the same stretch of Dakota Prairie, and between them they produced the most-watched band leader in the history of American television and the first woman to carry a network drama hour. Neither of those things was remotely predictable from that landscape in the 1930s. Her family left for California while she was still a child, and she grew up in the Los Angeles suburbs, in Burbank and Glendale. That relocation is the single most consequential thing that happened to her before she was 20. Burbank in the 1940s meant she was living about 20 minutes from the largest concentration of film studios on Earth, in an era when a young woman could still plausibly walk into that industry from outside it. The same girl left in Culm has no route at all. Her route in was beauty contests and a secretarial job. That is the whole of it. She entered pageants in Southern California in the early 1950s, which was a legitimate and well-used path into the studios at the time, and she typed for a living while she did it. There was no drama school, no theater background, no family in the business. From about 1954, she began picking up small parts in the anthology series that filled American television schedules through that decade. Half-hour dramas, a fresh story every week, a new cast every episode produced at enormous speed. It was the training ground for an entire generation of screen actors, and it taught one thing above all others, which was how to hit a mark and deliver a line correctly on the first take, because there was never going to be budget for a second. She did dozens of them: General Electric Theater, Death Valley Days, the westerns, and the crime half-hours that made up most of what was on. 4 or 5 years of turning up on a Monday to play somebody's wife or somebody's witness and being finished by Thursday. Nobody builds a reputation doing that. What it builds is competence, and competence is what got her into the room when a director who mattered was finally casting. In 1952, she married a former football player named Jean Dickinson. She was 20. The marriage lasted 8 years and ended in 1960. She kept the name for the next 66 years and is still using it. Angeline Brown of Culm, North Dakota, has been Angie Dickinson since she was 20 years old, on the strength of a marriage that finished before her career properly started. The film work built slowly and unremarkably. Gun the Man Down came in 1956, a low-budget western with a young James Arness in it, and there was a run of similar parts through the middle of the decade. Small roles in modest pictures, the sort of filmography that describes a working actress who will probably keep working for another few years and then stop. Nothing in it suggested what was coming. Then, in 1959, Howard Hawks cast her in Rio Bravo. Rio Bravo is one of the great American westerns, and it is built around John Wayne, Dean Martin, Ricky Nelson, and Walter Brennan holding a jailhouse against a small army. Into that, Hawks put a 27-year-old actress as a gambler called Feathers, and gave her something that westerns almost never gave a woman in 1959. He let her run the conversation. That sounds minor. In the context of a 1959 western, it was close to structural. The convention of the genre put women in the picture to be protected, to be worried about, or to be the reason a man does something. Hawks gave Feathers the initiative in nearly every scene she shares with Wayne, and then let the camera stay on her while she used it. Feathers is quicker than Wayne's sheriff. She is more comfortable in the room than he is. She is entirely aware of it, and the film is happy to stop and watch her enjoy the fact while he works out what to do with his hat. Wayne was 51 and the biggest star in the world. She was 27, with a decade of half-hour television behind her and nothing else. The scenes belonged to her. That relationship is a large part of why the picture still works 67 years later, and it made her career in about 20 minutes of screen time. She won the Golden Globe for New Star of the Year, and at 28, she went from a working television actress to somebody the studios had plans for. What followed was a decade close to the center of American film. Ocean's 11 came in 1960 and put her inside the Rat Pack orbit, working alongside Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin at the precise moment that group was defining what the word glamour meant to an entire country. Don Siegel cast her in The Killers in 1964, opposite Lee Marvin, in a picture originally made for television and released to cinemas because it was judged too violent to broadcast. John Boorman cast her in Point Blank in 1967 alongside Marvin again. That film is now taught as one of the toughest and most stylish crime pictures of the decade, and it has aged better than almost anything released around it. Big Bad Mama followed in 1974. Look at the directors in that list. Hawks, Siegel, Boorman. Those are three of the most serious filmmakers working in that period, and all three of them wanted her. There was television alongside it throughout. She never left it, in an era when film actors frequently regarded the small screen as a demotion, and that habit turned out to matter enormously. By the early 1970s, she had been working steadily for 20 years, in an industry that generally used actresses hard through their 20s and then stopped calling somewhere around 35. She was 41, and the biggest thing she would ever do had not happened yet. And then television gave her the biggest thing she ever did. There is a photograph taken outside a house in Beverly Hills fairly recently. A woman in her 90s, in comfortable clothes, walking down her own driveway to collect the post from the box at the end of it. She is unhurried, and she is entirely alone, and she looks perfectly well. Anybody over 60 who saw that picture recognized her immediately, which is the strange part, because she has not appeared in anything since 2009. We will come back to that. Policewoman arrived on NBC in September 1974, and the scale of what it did is easy to underestimate now. American network television at that point had women in enormous numbers, in sitcoms, in soap operas, as the wives and the secretaries and the girlfriends inside dramas built around men. What it did not have was a woman carrying an hour-long drama by herself, with her name first on the call sheet and the whole show organized around what her character did each week. Angie Dickinson is widely credited as the first. That phrasing is deliberate, and it is the standard formulation because television history is untidy, and there are always earlier partial cases somebody can point at. What is straightforward is that Policewoman was the first hour-long network drama built entirely around a woman that succeeded at scale, ran for years, and was noticed at the time as a change. She was 42 years old when it started. Hold that against what the business does with actresses at 42 then and now. The most famous thing Angie Dickinson ever did began in her 5th decade on television after 20 years of film work, at an age when the industry had usually finished with a woman's leading career. Pepper Anderson went undercover every week, in a different disguise and a different piece of Los Angeles, and the show ran for 4 seasons and 91 episodes. And it made her a household name in a way that Rio Bravo and Point Blank between them had not managed. She won a Golden Globe for it in 1975, and there was an effect outside the ratings that she has talked about since. Applications from women to police departments across the United States went up while that program was on the air. She has said that departments told her so themselves. That is her account rather than a published study, and it is worth marking as exactly that. What is not in dispute is the timing, and what is not in dispute is that a very large number of American women watched a woman do that job competently on television every week for 4 years and drew their own conclusion from it. Television had shown women a fairly narrow set of possible lives up to 1974. Policewoman added one. Carrying an hour drama is punishing work in a way that the finished program is designed to conceal. It is a 6-day week for most of the year, first call to last light, with the lead present in nearly every scene of every episode. There is no rotating ensemble to spread the load across, because the whole point of the show is that she is in it. She did that for 4 seasons, in her mid-40s, while the marriage described in the next few minutes was going on at home. Underneath the whole of that period was a marriage. In 1965, she married Burt Bacharach. Bacharach was, in that decade, one of the most successful songwriters alive. Walk On By, I Say a Little Prayer, Raindrops Keep Fallin' on My Head. The partnership with Hal David produced a run of hits that shaped what popular music sounded like for a decade. The two of them became one of the most photographed couples in American entertainment. He was writing the songs that defined the sound of the 1960s. She was making films with Sinatra and Wayne and Marvin. The public version of that marriage was as glamorous as anything the era produced. They were photographed at everything. He won Academy Awards in 1970 for Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. She was making pictures with the biggest names in Hollywood. For most of the 60s and 70s, they were a fixed point in the culture. The couple other people were photographed standing near. The private version, which took decades to become public, was harder. Bacharach wrote his own autobiography many years later and admitted the infidelity in it himself. This is not a second-hand account or an accusation from her side. He put it in his own book, under his own name, which removes any question of whose version this is. Angie Dickinson has described what it was like from the inside with a directness that is quite difficult to listen to. She has said he never loved her in the way that people conventionally mean by the word. And of that marriage, she said something shorter and considerably harder, which is that he had no respect for her. Asked whether she had loved him anyway, she said yes. The marriage lasted until 1981. 16 years. She has never conducted the aftermath in public in the way she could have. There was no book, no circuit of interviews, no sustained campaign against him across the 4 decades that followed. What exists is a handful of remarks, given when she was asked directly, delivered flatly, and never repeated for effect. And in 1966, a year after the wedding, their daughter was born. Leah Nikki Bacharach arrived 3 months premature. That is the beginning of the part of this story that shaped everything after it, and it is going to be told once, carefully, with nothing added. Nikki was born with lifelong visual impairment. She had difficulties across her childhood that nobody around her was equipped to understand, and which were only recognized much later as Asperger's syndrome. That recognition arrived decades after it would have been useful. In the 1960s and 1970s, the framework simply did not exist, which meant 2 parents with every resource in the world available to them were being given no accurate information at all about their own child. She spent years in residential care as a teenager. She was also, by any measure, formidable. She went to university and took a degree in geology, which is a hard science taken by a young woman with a serious visual impairment. and she took it in an era with almost none of the support that exists now. Across 3 decades, at several points, Angie Dickinson stepped back from her own career to care for her daughter. That is the through line of her adult life, and it sits underneath the filmography like a second job that nobody watching was ever told about. Every gap in her credits from the late 1960s onward has a possible explanation in it. Every part she turned down in a period when she could have taken anything has that behind it. The public was watching a glamorous film star. The work she was actually doing for 30 years was mostly at home. On the 4th of January 2007, Nikki died by suicide. She was 40 years old. That is stated once, and it will not be returned to. There is nothing further about it in this video, because there is nothing further that belongs to anybody outside that family. Angie Dickinson was 75. She had been working continuously since the early 1950s. She took one more part. In 2009, she appeared in a television film called Mending Fences, and that is the last acting credit of a career that began 55 years earlier. She never announced a retirement. There was no farewell interview and no valedictory profile, and nobody put out a statement. She simply stopped accepting work, and the industry took a while to notice, because a woman in her late 70s not appearing in things is not the sort of absence anybody investigates. The offers kept arriving, and the answer has been consistent for 15 years. She has been asked repeatedly to take what she calls grandmother parts, and she has turned every one of them down. The reason she gives is always the same one. Being home is better. That is the whole of it. Not bitterness about the industry, not a complaint about the roles available to women in their 80s. She would rather be at home. What she did with the 20 years after 2007 was almost nothing in public on purpose. She turned down the memoir. Publishers have approached her, and the tell-all that a woman with her address book could have written would have sold enormously. She worked with Sinatra, with Wayne, with Marvin, with Bacharach, across the most gossiped-about decades in the history of the business. She has said she is simply not interested in doing it. Consider precisely what she is declining. A woman who was inside the Rat Pack orbit in 1960, married to Burt Bacharach from 1965, working with Wayne and Marvin and Sinatra across 2 decades, holds more first-hand material about mid-century Hollywood than almost anybody now living. Every publisher in New York knows it. She has decided to take it with her. She floated the idea of a one-woman stage show at one point and talked about it publicly, and then let it go without explanation. That is about as close as she has come in 20 years to re-entering public life, and it went no further than a conversation. She appeared on CBS Sunday Morning in 2020. She turned up in a documentary about Sammy Davis Jr. Beyond that, from 2009 onward, the public record of Angie Dickinson is a handful of photographs taken by people who happened to be on her street. In February 2023, Burt Bacharach died. They had been divorced for 42 years by then. They had buried a daughter together in 2007, and when he died, Angie Dickinson became the only person left alive who remembers the whole of that story from the inside. The marriage, the child, the years of care, and the ending. Everybody else who could have told it is gone. Her own summing up of the career came earlier, on her 79th birthday, and it is characteristically unsentimental. She said she came along at the right time for a great many good things, that she met the great stars of her era and stayed friends with a lot of them, and that it was a fantastic life, really. So here is where she actually is. Angie Dickinson is 94 years old. She lives by herself in her house in Beverly Hills, on a street where a good many of the neighbors are famous, and she has been in that house for a long time. Her days appear to be quiet by design. She reads. She keeps up with a small circle. She does not go out to industry events and has not for a long time. She has cats, and they appear to be the organizing fact of her domestic life. A neighbor who looks after them when she is away has spoken about her publicly, and the phrase that came back was that she is the sweetest neighbor on the whole street. On a street in Beverly Hills, where a substantial share of the residents have their own entries in the film reference books, the 94-year-old who used to be Pepper Anderson is the one the neighbors describe that way. She is photographed occasionally. The pictures show a woman in her 90s who looks healthy and calm, collecting her post, going about a completely ordinary morning. She is not frail in them, and she is not hiding from the camera. She simply has no interest in being in front of one professionally. There is no public indication that she is ill. Nothing suggests she is in difficulty of any kind. And every account from anybody who has spoken to her or about her describes a woman who is content. What she is finished with the part of her life that involved other people watching. That is the deep breath, and it is quieter than the title suggests. There is no ruin at the end of this story. There is a 94-year-old woman in a comfortable house with her cats who has outlived her husband, her daughter, and very nearly everybody she made films with, and who decided sometime around 2009 that she had done enough and would like to be left alone now. She chose it. That distinction matters more than anything else in this video. A woman who has been withdrawn from is one story. A woman who withdrew is a completely different one, and the evidence points squarely at the second. She was offered work and said no. She was offered a book deal and said no. She was offered a stage show she had suggested herself and let it go. Every one of those was a door she could have walked back through, and each time she stayed where she was. The work is all still there. Rio Bravo plays somewhere in the world every week of the year, and Feathers is still quicker than John Wayne in every single screening 67 years after Howard Hawks shot it. Point Blank is on university film syllabuses. Ocean's 11 is a permanent fixture of what people mean when they say the early 60s. And Pepper Anderson opened a door in September 1974 that has never once closed since. Every woman who has carried an hour of network drama in the 50 years since walked through it, and a substantial number of them have said so out loud and by name. The program itself has dated, the way 70s television does. What it did has not dated at all. A girl born in Culm, North Dakota, in 1931, in a farming town of a few hundred people, ended up changing what American television was willing to put a woman in charge of. She is at home in Beverly Hills, 94 years old, and the ordinary business of a Tuesday goes on. The post gets collected from the box at the end of the drive. The cats get fed. The neighbors say hello. And by her own account, given plainly and without any prompting, it was a fantastic life, really.